Why are they
in
not
terms
worried?
of,
Why are they not worried about this?
well, because they have bulldozed uh, court cases before. And then when it comes to towards the end, when they have exhausted the chances of finding him guilty, him and other co-accused, when they have reached the end of the road and they cannot pin any crime on them, the president will now declare the termination of the trial in the interest of pardoning them, saying that you are forgiven, forgiving them for things they have not done to begin with.
Thank you, Dr. Jok Madut, for being part of KuirthiyTV. I really appreciate, and this is something many South Sudanese have been waiting to happen. The first time I said I wanted to have conversations with South Sudanese, you're one of the people who was suggested, and people wanted to hear from you.
Okay.
So thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
So I want to begin with the arrest and the trial of Dr. Riek Machar. So for many people, it's something that is legal. So the government has a ground to arrest him and then try him. For some people, they see this as a political witch hunt. So I want you to begin by giving us your personal impression of the arrest and the trial.
Yes, thank you, Quir, for this opportunity. The arrest of Dr. Riek Machar Teng didn't really come as a surprise to many of us who have watched the events of the implementation of the peace agreement and the contradictory messages coming out of the principal party to that agreement, which is the government of under Salva Kiir Mayar, the SPLM party. And so when the news came, it had already become very clear that the party to the agreement under President Salva Kiir had found itself in a fix. On the one hand, there is an agreement they have signed, and the whole world is looking at them to implement it in letter and spirit. But on the other hand, they realized that this agreement had the hallmarks of relinquishing certain aspects of power in order for the peace agreement to work. That means there was power distribution, there was the distribution of national resources, there was the issues of succession, what will happen at the end of the interim period, elections or no elections. So it was becoming very, very clear that the government, the party under Kiir was going to have to decide to pursue the full implementation of the agreement, perhaps to the possibility of them losing power, or scuttle the peace agreement in order to retain power. And so,
So one of the things I always wonder about, if they wanted to make Dr. Riek Machar redundant, and they've done that. For many people, Riek has been in some sort of informal arrest since he arrived in Juba.
mhm, mhm.
So if they wanted to make him redundant, they could have done that, and they have done that. So my question is, why go to the trial? And you said you're not surprised that this has happened because of the way they were doing,
Right.
they were going about the peace agreement. But if they have succeeded in making him redundant, why go to the extent of going for the trial?
I think it is entirely a part of the misguided thinking that the potentate, the head of state, has to save face. He has to prove to the people of South Sudan that Riek is up to no good from the beginning, and that we can do this either by force and take out all his forces as they tried to do around Juba when all the IO sites and all the cantonment sites where the IO forces were housed were attacked and dismantled, and they were all chased into the forest. Either we do that to the at the detriment of a party to a peace agreement looks really bad, or we can go through the court system and find him guilty in front of all in a transparent process And I think they chose the latter because that is the most face-saving thing they could do. Unfortunately, it has really now become the most embarrassing thing for them, for the powers that be in Juba, for President Kiir and his government and the people in the SPLM. It has embarrassed them already, as the warrant of formation of the special court has shown so many holes in it that no rational person can think that this court system is just, that it can be transparent, that it can lead to anything other than try to rig it. And it's going to turn out to be quite a challenge for the government because the evidence is very thin. The charges are not even very clear, and the court that has been set up has serious constitutional and legal problems
Why are they
in
not
terms
worried?
of.
Why are
Huh?
they not worried about this?
Well, because they have bulldozed court cases before. And then when it comes to towards the end, when they have exhausted the chances of finding him guilty, him and other co-accused, when they have reached the end of the road and they cannot pin any crime on them, the president will now declare the termination of the trial in the interest of pardoning them, saying that you are forgiven, forgiving them for things they have not done to begin with.
And so that's something they've done before.
Yes. And so it seems like they are going to go down that road because what are the accusations? What are the charges? The main charge, of course, is the war in Nasser, where a large number of SPLA soldiers were killed by the White Army. And so the accusation is that the White Army is essentially part of the SPLA-IO, and that they were taking their orders from Juba, from Vice President, and that the Vice President has committed war crimes by killing civilians and killing war prisoners and killing the people who came on a rescue mission. So this is a crime. This is a war crime. You've killed people that you had already apprehended, and you have killed civilians, and you have killed soldiers who had already surrendered. That is the charge. That is the principal charge. And now the problem is that charge will be very, very difficult to demonstrate by evidence. That's my view. I'm not a lawyer. I have not read the transcripts of the charge, but I have followed the news. The war broke out since the massacre, basically, essentially the massacre of an armed group, of an armed forces of a national army. And so, having followed that, I find it very difficult to see how they are going to demonstrate and pin a crime on Vice President. I think this trial should not have happened. In my view, I think it is a political problem which is being forced into courts instead of trying to reach a political solution to what is essentially a political disagreement. And this is not the first time it has happened. Dr. Riek Machar is no news to anybody in regards to his disagreements with the SPLA under Kiir now and previously under John Garang. But despite all the suffering and the killing his disagreements have inflicted on the people of South Sudan, it's very hard to pin it on him as a crime because essentially it is a political crisis, and a political crisis can only be solved through political processes.
Okay, so before I ask the implications of the trial in terms of ethnic relations, because South Sudan is a very divided country, I wanted to ask if they have some point. Let's say what happened in Nasser. There were people who were killed as SSPDF soldiers, and then David Majur was killed. Do you think they have a point only that the way they went about it is the problem? Do they have a point that someone has to be held accountable? there was some sort of historical connection between Dr. Riek Machar and the White Army, even if they've not demonstrated today, because what we know is that Dr. Riek Machar was trying to mediate
Yes.
so that the general was not harmed. But do you think that they have some argument to make, even if they've not gone about it in the right way?
Well, it's the government of the day. So obviously, we have to give it the benefit of the doubt that if the government thinks that a citizen of South Sudan, whether it's somebody in power or an ordinary citizen, has committed a crime, they have the right to charge this person and try this person. That's their ultimate sovereignty issue that they have the right to pursue. And so, in that regard, yes, they have a right to charge and pursue anyone.
Mhm.
But if we are operating in a country such as South Sudan, a multi-ethnic, multi political parties, multi-religious, a society that is deeply, deeply divided ethnic society, there is need for caution in how you pursue, how you go about it.
Okay.
Because there are serious implications for the unity of the country going forward. And I'm not saying that people should be excused from their crimes just to maintain unity of the country.
Mhm.
I'm saying that the government has not done its homework. Government under Salva Kiir is not known for its due diligence when it comes to documenting cases, documenting crimes, presenting a legitimate case that can stand up in court. And so now, because Riek has been seen as a nuisance to the powers that be, Riek has been a thorn on the side of the SPLM. You want to deal with him nonchalantly, in a way, really, like going after him without really clear evidence. Because what they have, what they will present in court, in my view, is haphazard, it is unproven, it is going to be challenged, and it is going to embarrass the government.
And I always wonder, because this is not the first time, and South Sudan is not lacking people who are informed, whether they are legal scholars, whether they are political
Mhm.
scholars. There are people. Now, since 2005, we've seen this trend where they make these accusations or they raise some issues. And instead of acting like a conventional government to say, we are a government of millions of people, we cannot just rush into things. So, what we can do is, here's something we think is wrong. Can we call legal scholars to sort of see if this is something we can rationalize and go forward with it? But because Riek Machar has become a hate trope, they don't think about this thing. So
Mhm.
when do you think they will be able to start saying, okay, we need to change the way we look at things because of the embarrassment you talked about? This is going to embarrass them. When do you think they will learn that?
I don't think they will ever learn it because what is at stake for them? What is at stake for them is public opinion trial of Riek Machar, right? That Riek Machar is a test case for how many people will support the government and how many people in the public will condemn Riek.
Mhm.
So they are looking for sympathies from government supporters to say that Riek is guilty, whether proven or not. And so long as the public believes Riek is guilty, I think they will have scored their political points, which is really the issue. It's the political scores that are at stake and not the legal system, not the welfare of the country, not addressing issues of disintegration, the imminent disintegration of this country. And as a result, it adds to what we have always known about the government under Salva Kiir, which is that it bangs on division, on ethnic division. Its backbone, its ability to stay in power is divisions among the people. So that some people will say, this government is ours and we must defend it at all costs, whether it is wrong or right. So that some people will say, that government belongs to other people and we are going to fight it. to the death. And I think that is where we are now, and South Sudan is at crossroads, unfortunately. As we speak, there is not a single community, county, or state that does not have independent private militia force ready to fight for its share of the pie. And if you have such a country where everybody is ready to fight it out and shoot it out in order to get their rights, that is not a country where anybody is safe. The illusion is and it's palpable. The illusion, which is that we have to all arm ourselves to defend ourselves. And I don't see how a country where everybody is armed is a country where anyone can be safe. And so if the point of this trial is to maintain loyalty of certain people, of certain communities, certain groups, certain states, then that is what they are pursuing. And it is not, they are not pursuing a solution to a crisis which is facing the country.
So what do you think?
Because the crisis itself is a political fodder.
Okay. What do you think is the main fallout from this? Is it political? Is it ethnic? What is the main fallout from the trial?
Well, it's going to be primarily ethnic.
Okay.
Because already many supporters of IO, as it were, or supporters of Dr. Riek Machar himself, be these people from his ethnic community or sympathizers from other communities like in Equatoria and Upper Nile, I think this trial is simply going to be a testament to whether this country can stay one or disintegrate. If Riek was found guilty today by this court that has been set up haphazardly, and it has set up without regard for the hierarchy of the courts, with regards to, there's no regard for even constitutional order. If that court found Riek Machar guilty today of all these crimes, I don't think that country is going to sit well and in peace. There will be a crisis on our hands on the back of this trial.
There are people who say that saying there will be an ethnic element to this is a mischaracterization because this is just about a politician. I've seen this from many Jing people, from people from the Equatorians, and also even some where I've seen them writing now. It's about Dr. Riek Machar. Do you think it's a fair argument to make that this is not an ethnic issue, even if there's an ethnic dimension that people are bringing, who are concerned about ethnic problems, are the ones embedding ethnicity into this dynamic?
Yeah, I guess I can take all arguments. One being that it's a political disagreement issue. It's a problem between President Kiir and his Vice President, Dr. Riek, and they should be allowed to settle it on their own without dragging in the people of South Sudan. Right? That is a fair argument, and I think it's a legitimate argument. Unfortunately, that argument is from optimistic, hopeful political perspective. It's not based on the reality of how people feel about these leaders. Yes, there are many people who are on behind President Kiir, who are somewhat unhappy with the way the country is run and don't want President Kiir's disagreement with Riek to drag them in. But there are also people who think that this is a survival matter. This is a question of existential survival of communities, such that if President Kiir loses and somebody else who is not from Jiang or from another group that is aiming for unity of the country come to power, those who are supporting President Kiir will suffer. And therefore, they must do everything possible to keep Kiir in place, to make sure that Kiir succeeds in this confrontation. I take that. But then, if you look at the way everybody is fighting now, let's look at people from Unity State, from Mayom or Mayandit or Bantu, Panyajar, their confrontations that used to be historically there with people from Twitch, people from Apuk, people from Congo, from Lao, from Apungpa Doj, from Lona Pagar, all the borders of Warab State and Lake State with unity are anybody who has paid attention to this dynamic of conflict there will easily tell you that all is not quiet on that front. And Dr. Riak's trial and the conclusion of the court might as well be the lightning rod
Okay.
for, yeah.
I want to now transition. It will be a good segue to something many people are talking about. I talked to Agil Riek Machar, who believes President Kiir is being misled by some sort of a rapacious cabal who don't care about the
Mhm.
country, and he doesn't actually know what is happening in the country.
Right.
Abraham Olich doesn't buy the argument. He believes President Kiir is in charge. So connecting what they said and what we just talked about, the trial,
Mhm.
can someone say someone who believes Kiir is not in charge say this is not his trial, it's someone else driving it, or can we say no, he is in charge of this trial, he's running it?
Well, beginning with Agel, I think Agel may well be correct in terms of our president being a nice man, a humble man who is being misguided and misled by people around him. But since when? When did this begin? I mean, President Kiir has been in power for going to 21 years. Where did this nice man begin, and where did his niceness end and taken over by people around him to guide this process? It just doesn't make sense. What I'm saying is that being nice, quote unquote, is really not what takes the country, and it's not what it takes to run the country. Nice is okay, but nice is not what we need. What we need is a decisive president, someone who makes brave decisions, even if they lose him political capital. He has to make these decisions, unpopular as they may be, at the right time when he needs to do it. President Kiir is has not been known as a decisive president at the moment of burning issues. The only thing, the only decisions that President Kiir is known for publicly in South Sudan is appointing people, is firing people, is declaring war, is distributing national resources to his people, or announcing major infrastructure projects that lead nowhere. Those are the things that President Kiir has always decided. And if you remember, Baragazal Highway, if you remember Akon International Airport, if you remember the talk of setting up refineries for South Sudan's oil, if you can recall the money public projects that he has donated to people. He went to Capoeira and declared that he was donating a high school to people in Capoeira. He also offered money to build churches all across Warab, Catholic churches, and gave money to the Catholic Church to do this. He also agreed to establish something called oil stabilization account or future generations account to make sure that the price of oil is stabilized by having an account that you can take from and you can add to. When the oil prices is low, you take from it and make the difference. When the oil prices goes beyond what you have agreed, you take the surplus and put it in that account to make sure that you can at least plan for 10 years on a regular price of barrel in oil proceeds. Instead, all of these projects have not shown anything. They have all remained unfinished to this day. So that is really not something you can credit the president for being nice. Instead, we should ask President Kiir, myself, I would say, if President Kiir has reached the end of the road as a decisive leader, perhaps the time has come for him to talk with all of us about possibility of succession, of handing over, or at least making a transition through a peaceful mean, like the elections were always slated to be held. That may be a more peaceful, smooth mechanism of transition. Or he can simply say, "Give me 2 years to organize ourselves, and I will hand over to somebody." If the country is collapsing and disintegrating and facing existential threats to remain as a united country, let me organize the situation such that we can have a peaceful transition. And you people of South Sudan can decide regarding who I hand over the powers. And if you like that person, we take it. If you don't like that person will only be in power until he holds elections or she holds elections. I think that would have been the best way for the president to address the crisis of this country, instead of us saying, "Oh, the president is a nice man and he's being misled by bad people." Bad people coming from where? He's the one who appoints them.
Okay. So,
And he's the one who is in control.
so if we say, and this is where I struggle with this, and being nice is not, Agil is not the first one to say it. In his book, Elijah Maluk actually says this in his book, that he was the voice of reason in the big five. On one hand you have John Garang, then you have Nguyen Banh, you have Carbino,
Carbino.
so you have Arok. So there was also a tug of war, and he was also the calm one. So, and Malok says that he was respected by officers because he was calm. Now, that we cannot take away that, but being a nice person doesn't translate to being a good leader.
Exactly.
And also, you can be nice and also make tough decisions for the people. Now, my question is, if President Kiir is still in charge and he makes decisions, let us say, but he still sees all these problems and he doesn't care, what does that say? So if he actually is in charge and sees all these problems, that will not make him a good man, and that will translate into him doesn't care about the country. So what is going on? Is that because he doesn't care, or maybe he doesn't see what he's doing as a problem? Because I have a problem understanding why someone who cares about the country would see all these things and doesn't do anything.
That's a very good question, Queer, and that is really the gist of the matter when it comes to the way President Kiir has been running the country and the prospects for transition. I think people who have been in power for long begin to convince themselves that they are the only reason why the country still stands despite all the crises. They say this to themselves, to oneself, for long enough for them to believe it. And other people around them who wants to benefit from the status quo will also repeat this to the head of state, saying, "Sir, you are the pillar on which this country stands, and we want you to continue." I think that much we have now seen. There are lots of people who go to President Kiir to tell him that the country remains standing despite all the challenges. Like, the country was born as a middle income country at the time of independence. And now it has become the epicenter of suffering and instability, with over 91% of people living below the poverty line. Who can go to the president and say, "You are what this country needs," despite all this that has happened? So then, what is happening for sure, there are people who are milking the weakness and inabilities of President Kiir to make decisions, and they are using him for that. But the president is still the person who is making tough decisions, especially decisions that are not related to welfare of the people, decisions that are simply orchestrating musical chairs of power. Today you are in, tomorrow you are out. Who would have thought that CDR, James Kwangchol, would be fired today, 6 months after he was appointed? And he was the one who brought a semblance of stability to Malakal and to Upper Nile state. What was the reason why he was fired? Nobody told us. And so his job there is to simply listen to people who lobby and press on him to change things. But at the end of the day, he's still the one who make the decision, not those people. Because if he was calculating, if he was a leader who is looking for his own name to be left behind, to be remembered for all the good things as a liberator should, he would have not allowed these people to influence him. And I don't believe that these people are influencing him. I think President Kiir remains the final decision maker on in terms of who joins his government and who doesn't, and what dockets he gives to which type of people. I think to say that President Kiir is being misled is a total mischaracterization. I think President Kiir still believes that he is owed by the people of South Sudan. He is owed a reward for being a liberator, and that to challenge him and to try to push for him to exit power is to simply be ungrateful.
But we can all agree that he's owed something. And I think no one can take that away from him. He's the one who raised the flag. So and he's been in the Liberation War, Anyanya one, and then SPLA War. So he's owed something. But he's not owed something that is at the expense of the destruction of the country. So
Yeah.
that's not what he's owed. Now he's talked about something like that.
Mhm.
But one of the things I want to know, like if he wants to remain in power, and that's what he wants to, how can he convince people that what he's doing is the right thing? Like, how can he convince people?
At this stage, I don't think he can convince people anymore. I think certainly a lot of us think that we owe him credit for him and thousands and millions of others, obviously, not just him, who have risked and paid the ultimate price for South Sudan to be independent. No question about it. He is not thinking beyond liberation effort in order for his legacy to be solidified. He is simply thinking that if South Sudanese are now free, the country is free, that they have done their job, and that the reward for them is for them to stay in power until the end of their lives. And that is not leadership. That is not liberation. That is not being that's not being a leader, because you have to ask yourself to what end.
Yep.
Because if it was to be liberated in order for South Sudanese to live better lives than they did under the hands of the Arabs in Khartoum, if it was being liberated as a culmination of almost 200 years of struggle against foreign domination, beginning with the Turco-Egyptian rule, then the question is, are our people better off now than they were under imperialism, than they were under Arab control? And the answer is loudly a no, that our people are not in better shape. Yes, freedom may be in itself an end, and perhaps it is something that we recognize that even if we are poor and we are poor in our own country, it is better to be poor in your house than to be a slave to nobody. So that may be a credit that that can be given to him and to other liberators. But they fall short and they taint that legacy when their policies and actions have driven the country much deeper into the ground with regards to the use of resources, the welfare of people, where children of South Sudan are still dying from causes that don't kill children anywhere else in the world anymore, where infrastructure is in shambles despite the declaration that have been made that money was given. The oil for roads, for example, where is it? Why is it that President Kiir, a liberator extraordinaire, does not ask for evaluation and assessment of projects that he has declared?
Okay.
That is not a liberator, in my view.
So before I go into, I know why there's an echo. Okay. So I want to go into the issue of succession, but I want to ask a question about what Awolish said, and I agree to some extent that to say that the
Mhm.
president is not in charge when he's the ultimate decider of things
Mhm.
seems unreasonable. But then there's also something that seems to point towards what a girl says regarding the president making decisions based on what he's told. We may say that it is not disinformation, that they are not intentionally misleading the president, or the president is not feeling that he's being disinformed, but there's a lot of
Mhm.
misinformation, that the information being given to him to make decisions is coming from self-interest by people around him.
Right.
So when he makes the decision at the end, he makes it based on what he thinks is the right decision.
Right.
That still goes to the president being misled, but it's
Mhm.
not disinformation, rather it's a misinformation.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with the idea that obviously there is no leader of a state, a leader of a country that runs the country singularly through his or her own ideas. Leaders are the measure of the people around them. No question about it. So if year after year, president has surrounded himself with some people, and the results were still the same, which is that the people of South Sudan were being stripped of their resources, and they are being pushed ever more into poverty, and they are being pitted against each other so that they are killing one another through all these tribal militias. The insecurity is ever more ubiquitous, and more people are dying through violence in South Sudan today than they were even during years of pitched liberation battles. If that is what you see every year, and you would have to ask yourself, are these people advising me correctly, or are they telling me what they think I need to hear? And on basis of what they have told me, I make these decisions only for these decisions to result in disasters. That you would have to ask yourself that. If you are a people's leader, a person who has done so much to make this country possible, given up your education. He was very young when he started the first war. He never finished his school, and he has led battles in the SPLA. We have seen pictures of him pushing boats across the rivers. If you are a person who has done so much to make this country possible, wouldn't you be then vigilant about the consequences of your decisions?
But do you think there's some sort of, I like what you said, but do you think he has some sort of an imposter syndrome, that
Right.
he feels people around him undermines him because the way he became the leader was a consequence of a tragedy?
Sure.
So do you think he has some sort of an imposter syndrome, that he feels he's undermined, and when a person feels like that and you have a power, it becomes dangerous. He uses to protect himself because the people
Mhm.
around him want to take power. Does he have that? And
Yeah.
connect that with the question of succession, because it will make succession difficult. He
Right.
becomes, he feels if he gives power away, then he loses any purpose.
Well, I think President Kiir, as a person, as a character, as a personality, has so many positive attributes. One of them is that he knows everybody, and he has very sharp memory of people's identities and names. He sees you once, and that's it. The next time he sees you, he'll call you out by your name. So that's really something good in a leader. If you keep track of who is who and what they have done for this country and what they have done to you, for you as a person, it's good. It helps you assign people to correct roles. That's one major attribute I like about President Kiir. But President Kiir is also very vindictive as a person. He will never forget anything negative done to him. And being vindictive means that he's wary of these people. He's ever more vigilant for people who have done him wrong to never come back to positions of power, even if they are good. That is a very negative thing to have as a leader, because what you are doing, South Sudan is known as a country that has not really sharpened its, and we are lacking people who have good ideas and who are good committed, patriotic implementers of projects. And if President Kiir is selecting people out just because they have done him wrong, then he is not maximizing the use of South Sudan's human capital. And that is a tragedy. Now, if you come to issues of succession, because he is looking at people in all these various ways, people that he might see as undermining him and push them away, then the pool from which he takes for people to run things is ever more constricted. And the result is that he feels like he is the only one who can continue to run this country, because if he leaves, South Sudanese will kill each other. If he leaves, nobody will guide South Sudan in terms of infrastructure and development. If he leaves, security will collapse. The SPLA is a kind of a band of brothers and sisters where they are loyal and committed to him, and he sees himself as the only glue that keeps the SPLA going. And if he goes, that military base will collapse and South Sudan will be in jeopardy. He has convinced himself of this, but he is not immortal. So obviously, at some point, you are going to have to think about what happens when you leave. Whether you live in by act of God or you live by your own volition, there is going to come a time when you leave. So you are, by doing things the way you are doing them now, you are simply saying, I'm going to push for this country to remain as it is until the day I die or day I leave, and don't care about what happens to it when I go.
Which is,
And that would be the ultimate bearing of his legacy. If he continues to think that South Sudan, I'm going to just keep running it until I go, and then when I go, I don't care what happens to it.
and that's disastrous.
That is disastrous. And that is ultimately going to be what happens, in my view.
Okay.
God forbid that it happens because President Kiir, something happens to him. We want him to live for a long time. And we want him to eventually make the decision that, yeah, Jama, I am going home. I have done my bit. I have run my course. I have traveled the distance. And now I'm going to Akon or Nairobi or Juba or where have you to play with my grandchildren. And here is the country that I have liberated for you. Do with it as you wish hereafter. That would be the best way for a revered liberation leader like him to go. Not all these other possibilities, including the country disintegrating on his hands and becoming balkanized the way it's beginning to look like now, or people fighting, everybody in a war, all against all, or people becoming fed up with this economic situation and the poverty and lack of money, lack of services, such that people might go onto the streets and create chaos, which would be the worst way for President Kiir to go.
So, and the one thing I agree, and I want to ask you about the question of succession and what people are saying about Dr. Benjamin Bol Mel, a vice president. But the one thing I wanted to point out, he may be right in terms of SPLM. If he leaves, the loyalty people have towards SPLM will be affected, and I think many people will not have that kind of loyalty if he leaves, and SPLM maybe disintegrate him. Even some people who are veteran members of the SPLM may not have loyalty, but he remains the symbol of that historical SPLM. So that may be right. But I want to ask you about what people say about Benjamin Bol Mel since he was appointed vice president and was elevated to the first deputy. So many people are saying he's the heir apparent. What do you think?
Well, the rise of Dr. Benjamin Bol Mel from a businessman, a very good businessman, to being promoted in the army, to being elevated to vice president and to second in command of the ruling party. That rise has really shocked a lot of people. But Bol Mel is a product of the political ecosystem that we have, where President Kiir sees people who can serve him and be loyal to him and unquestioning to him. And I think that is where Dr. Benjamin Bol Mel found himself, being respected and trusted by President Kiir. So he comes into that space. Is he there to continue to prop President Kiir, or is he there with the potential for him to be the replacement of Kiir should President Kiir decide to go home today? That one we don't know. No, I don't think anybody knows. I don't think Benjamin Bol Mel himself has expressed interest, or at least not that he has declared that he has aspirations to take over the country.
Well, some people would say it's politics, and it would be really disastrous for him to come out
Mhm.
publicly and say, "Yes, I want to replace President Kiir."
No.
That would really be unbecoming of him, and it would not be wise. But having seen the way he has been elevated
Mhm.
from just being, as you said, a businessman, not just as vice president, but within the party itself to be the second most senior person within the SPLM, and also sidestepping the historical hierarchy within the SPLM. That gives some
Right.
people an impression that yes, even if he doesn't say it, even if the president doesn't say it, this is what
Mhm.
happens when the president is looking for someone to replace him.
That may well be the case. We can speculate until tomorrow about whether there was actually a plan behind these decisions, or whether these are acts of political maneuvering on the side of President Kiir and on the side of Benjamin Bolmel. We do not know. All we know is that there is no question that President Kiir has really reached a point where he has to groom somebody to take over from him.
Mhm.
Because even age wise, even if he lives for the next 50 years, he has reached a stage in his life where he is he's not physically optimum to continue. So there would be no doubt that grooming somebody is the rational thing to do. Is it Benjamin Bolmel that he's grooming to take over? Maybe.
Mhm.
Is it going to be his daughter, Adut Salfakir?
Mhm.
Maybe. Is he simply putting them there to continue to help him run the country? It is possible.
Mhm.
And because of the way people are elevated and brought down throughout the last 20 years, anything is possible.
That's right.
Some people might even say that perhaps President Kiir is giving everything to Bolmel so that at some point he can blame Bolmel for everything that has gone wrong in this country. Right. So he may be a man who is being elevated and being prepared, and then finger pointed when the ship is about to go down.
So he may be the fall guy.
He may be a fall guy. Who knows?
I think Awolid makes a similar argument that President Kiir uses people like chess pieces, like pawns, and he likes to play people against each other. According to Awolid, is saying that if there's a tug of war, because we don't know whether the appointment of Adut is to counter the rise of Dr. Benjamin Bol Mel or they're working together, we still don't know. But one of the things he says is President Kiir plays a victim, and he puts people on loggerheads for his own amusement, and it's also a power play. So that could also be an issue to sort of say, okay, if something happens, then I wasn't in charge; it was him.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that may be the case, and in fact, we have seen this happen so many times before, right? Even the whole idea that South Sudan is at war with itself from 2013. President Kiir will find so many people to blame except for himself as the man who declared war. Ministers have been fired and then blamed for problems. Maying Ayi, as Minister of Presidential Affairs, was fired and blamed on camera by President Kiir as the man who swallowed the Bargaza Road. Even the current Minister of Finance, once he was minister before, was also insulted in public as the man who did not tell the president where the money was and had open bank accounts all over the place. The question is, why does President Kiir know, at least supposedly he knows from the way he talks, that these people have done bad, that these people have messed with the resources of the country, and yet he doesn't put them to book, bring them to book? Because if you were really saying that this is a way of managing the country and creating a deterrent for people not to misuse resources, then people who have been accused of mismanagement or waste should have been held to account for those things in order for the next person to know that this is no longer the usual power play where you destroy the resources and then you go home and enjoy your resources in foreign country like others have done before. I think President Kiir has failed flagrantly in creating a deterrent against mismanagement of resources.
So,
or else he is accusing people of things they have not done.
if let's say the president is in charge, he's making all these decisions, he gets some ideas from people around him. He sees people are not being paid salaries. He sees different ethnic groups are on each other's throat. He sees the agreement is failing. He sees the trial of Dr. Riek Machar may cause ethnic fallout. He sees the country is not developed since 2005, and in some cases, it has actually deteriorated. But he doesn't do anything. That, to me, makes him feel like a wicked villain, someone who doesn't care about anything, he only cares about his power. But what you said earlier, that he has some positive element to him. How can we reconcile this? Someone who sees all these things and it doesn't really care. That would make him almost a villain par excellence.
No, yes, I think the negative things about President Kiir and the positive things about him may cancel each another out. But the major of the legacy of a leader is as simple as the welfare of the people, right? If the people of South Sudan live better lives than they did before, then no matter how vindictive, no matter how violent, no matter how all these other things that the president is accused of may have been prevalent, people will still fall back and say, at least he has cared about his people. At least people had vaccinations. At least people have food. At least, but he hasn't. There is nothing to. There is really very, very little that can be counted as a. Other than the independence of South Sudan, what else can we count as the signal achievement of President Kiir? One is at loss to count anything, right? So I think that question is really something that needs to be addressed to him directly by people who are around him. Here is what the public are saying. People in South Sudan are saying, you haven't done well for them, and you're gone to waste in terms of you demonstrating to them what you had aspired to offer them by liberating this country. Because liberation in itself is really not going to be remembered for very long. Many people have already even forgotten the challenges that the SPLA went through, the challenges that communities went through. I was in Malwalkon in 2002 in Awil East, and there was darkness everywhere in terms of food was running out, famine was looming, the Murahalin were coming from the north, the Antonov was dropping bombs like nothing else. We experienced the bombing in Malwalkon itself and saw people maimed by shrapnel, and people had no hope for tomorrow. The horizon was completely clouded, but there were SPLA generals who said, this is temporary. Our time will come when we will live a better life. And that is what kept people of South Sudan hopeful all these years, even beyond. And so to have a country become independent and free and supposedly an open democratic society with oil money flowing like sand, with non-oil revenue now coming in, and the country having political freedoms, I think one is at loss to find exactly, besides liberation and freedom, which of course freedom has no monetary value on it, obviously, but apart from that, what else can we say has really been given to the people of South Sudan to be proud of, even to want to call themselves South Sudanese? God knows we don't even have a sense of collective nationhood. we don't even really show loyalty to the nation state on a daily basis. We only show loyalty to the tribe or ethnic group because the ethnic group is our ultimate fallback position. When our lives are threatened, when our stomachs are empty, when our kids are dying, the tribe is the frontline intervener, not the state today. And the reason is that South Sudan did not ask itself the ultimate question at the time of independence, or even throughout the years of the liberation. Late John Garang used to talk about what South Sudan would be like once it is free. But really, that question was not explored through what sort of policies, what institutions would be built in order to give people of South Sudan a sense that they have a stake in the state, to give the people of South Sudan a sense that they belong to this nation state called South Sudan primarily, and then to the tribe secondarily. But if the tribe is the one uh, taking charge of the welfare of people, obviously the loyalty is going to be to the ethnic group. So we really don't have a nation. We have a state, but even that state does not have the capacity of monopolizing the use of force such that citizens don't kill each other willy-nilly. So we have a weak state, but it is nothing more than a geographical entity. We don't have a nation, which is measured in terms of people feeling an attachment and affinity to that piece of land, feeling that they have a stake in the welfare of that state and defend that state, and the integrity of that state and unity of that state is not being defended, because what is in it for me to be a South Sudanese if that state is not giving me the basic things that a citizen should expect from his or her country?
So the default position becomes about the tribes, and the tribes are the
Absolutely.
ones, the immediate. Wolf called them the parochial association, which are immediate to us.
Absolutely.
So I think one of the things maybe they can think about, and it may be too late for President Kiir, although handing over power peacefully may be his greatest legacy.
Absolutely.
But it may be time for people around him to sort of say what has happened in the last 2 decades has not reflected the president as being a good leader, because you cannot be wrong if you center the people. If the basis of your leadership is what the people want, schools, roads, hospitals, security, if that is your focus, I don't think you can be wrong. And if they will focus at least for him to think, even if he doesn't have long to be in power, he has to change, because if he leaves now, the person who comes after him is going to use the same method to lead, decrease.
Right.
So I think we will have to pose it to people around him to say, if you care about this country and this man, tell him what is happening.
I think that definitely. And you may be right that perhaps it's too late in the day to do that. Although, of course, starting to talk that way is a way to level the field such that the person who comes after him will chart a different direction from what President Kiir has done. I think if we look at even President Bashir, negative as it may be, the way we thought about him, he said, President Kiir, the cars is not what you want. Cars is not what South Sudanese want. South Sudanese want road, they want telephones, they want hospitals, they want schools, they want infrastructure so that they can do trade. So they want security so that they are able to travel the way they used to do. Even during the time of the Arab control, South Sudanese used to travel from one end of the country to the next and do trade and graze cattle and slaughter cows to sell. People from Urul and Rumbek and Gogrial used to go all the way to Tambora to sell their meat. But now there is no such thing. President Kiir does not lack the guidance. President Kiir does not lack advice, even from his enemies. President Kiir has simply lacked decisive leadership. The decision by the top leader saying that whether people like it or not, I have come to the conclusion that this is what we have to do in order for South Sudanese to feel that they have a country once.
Okay. So before I ask you the final word, I want you to weigh in on something that people are talking about. You know, there is an event in Jonglei State, the Red Belt, because we have many paramilitary groups in South Sudan. And to me, they are a manifestation of systemic failure. So something is broken in the system. That's why these groups want to protect themselves. So some people are mad at you because you characterize the Red Belt as a rebellion.
Right.
So what do you say to that?
Well, okay, fine. I take it. I take the criticism that in terms of the words I have chosen to use, instead of simply say that the people in Jonglei, people in Bor particularly, like all the others, whether you are in Unity or in Warap or wherever, or recently in Capoeira, with some groups of young men saying that they are tired of being attacked by others and they are just going to arm themselves, the Arrow Boys, what have you. Our history is one where citizens have had to choose to defend themselves because the state, which we had given all the rights, has failed in its fundamental responsibility, which is to provide equitable security to all of us. So I wasn't surprised that Red Belt has come up. I wasn't even against it in terms of why should they do that? I wasn't even saying that they have no right to protect themselves. What I am saying in that comment, half jokingly, is that no, you can't say that this is a mere self-defense force when in fact they are doing things that are not even within the purview of that protection, because they were talking about the Murle attacking them, they were talking about possibility of armed robbers attacking them, and therefore they are going to be a defense, a local, ethnic, or communal defense force. And in that regard, it would be not any different from any other community that has chosen to go down that road. I think Red Belt, in my view, I think it is simply an opposition army, because if you are taking into your hands the right to safety, because it's simply because you are declaring the state failed.
Mm-hmm.
So the state is not giving it to me, I'm going to take it. So then in reality, constitutionally and legally, there is no citizen who has been granted the right to use force to harm others without the state intervention. It doesn't make sense legally and constitutionally. The act of use of force to provide security is a fundamental responsibility of the state. So when you arm yourself, you are simply saying the state has failed. So you should be directing your anger to the state, not to other citizens. That was my.
So you withdraw the rebellion characterization.
Yes, okay, fine. I will take the word rebellion back.
But I think you're right. When it's one thing for people to do something, but they don't know how it is legally or politically characterized. So even if they say, "Oh, this is not a rebellion," people can say, as you explain, if you take up arms to do or to perform a responsibility that is constitutionally in the hand of the leadership. And to some extent, you actually attack the state, because I think there was some sort of altercation between the Red Belt
Yeah,
group and also the national security.
yeah,
Then, by definitionally, it's an act against the state that can be characterized as a rebellion. But
absolutely.
but then again, we know why they form. I see, and I think this is the nuance that get lost on the social media.
But it's a matter of equity as well, right?
Yeah.
So citizens in South Sudan feel that how is it that some people can be allowed to do certain things and not us?
Yeah.
So it is a matter of equity. And yes, on that basis, I would say the Red Belt, if it is just a group of people who have chosen to do this, or it is a communal decision, and in fact, I don't believe it is all the Boer people who say this is ours. And whatever segment of that community that has chosen that path can be excused in saying that we are not the first. There are people running around with guns. And if they are coming to abduct our children and take our cows and kill our women, and the state is nowhere to be called upon, Who are you to tell us not to do this?
That's right. So I want you to close by just what is your advice, just maybe a minute or two, what's your advice to the government of South Sudan to sort of center the people? Because I'm always speaking about this, center the people. If you focus on what the people want, not this power operation where you fire and decree in, decree out, and that has become the function of the state, of the leadership, and it's not serving people. So,
Right.
what is your advice in terms of centering the people and changing the conversation in case someone else comes into power? They don't use the same modus operandi.
Yes, it's a difficult one because everything is connected in an entire loop from the resources that the country generates being invested primarily in ensuring that every citizen is safe and that when the citizen is safe, they become more productive. When they are productive, they are no longer relying on handouts from the state. They are simply able to graze their cattle, to grow their crops, to do their fishing, to do their trade, to collect their wild foods, to survive, and even live better without the state intervention. That is because the first primary intervention of the state is to ensure that the resources of the country are used to facilitate, modify, strengthen the security apparatus so that every citizen is feeling safe. And then it will connect to the economic. And I think what the state can do in this regard is to institute by law a transparent and controlled use of the country's resources. Let's say oil. If you generate this amount of money from oil sales, you have to make a decision about how you use it. I would say to innovate, you take one third of the income and put it away for future generations. You take one third and put it in the major infrastructure projects, the roads, the electricity, the agriculture, the infrastructure in general. And then the other third for running everyday expenses of a state, like investing in education, training teachers, training health workers, and doing that. If you put one third of the oil money in infrastructure projects, you can easily employ 3 million South Sudanese, especially in agriculture and livestock. If you employ 3 million youth in South Sudan today, not only will they be self-sufficient, they will also pay taxes. And you take those taxes and invest them in other projects or save it to have a wealth fund, to have a sovereign wealth fund that you can put away. And if you do that, I think everything else will fall in place. Because if people feel safe, they will do business, they will take risks, they will go everywhere. If people feel that they have a stake in this state and they have invested in their lives through education or through all kinds of training and economic investments, they will have everything in life to lose. And if you have something to lose, you don't race to a battlefield. You're not going to be recruited by anyone. If you feel like I cannot go to war and leave my shop, I cannot go to war and leave my technical training that I have been offered, people will have to be helped to invest in their welfare and in their futures and in themselves in order to persuade them and wean them from conflict being seen as a viable protection mechanism, as even a way to get resources. I was just told the other day the Red Belt robbed a shop in, well, they may be unconfirmed news, but they robbed. Poked Up was attacked, and some shop was robbed, and people are already pointing fingers at Red Bell. I don't know if it is confirmed or not, but what I'm saying is that when people see conflict as a way to live, the only thing the state can do is to wean them from that by investing, helping them invest in their futures, such that there is a new horizon upon them.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much. This has been really informative, and I think what people were saying is this is not going to disappoint, and it hasn't. So
Thank you
thank
so
you.
much.